Well, thank you both for your provocations this afternoon. We have clocks ticking in front of us, and indeed not a vast amount of time ahead of us. So I'm going to plunge in with my first question. You know, I'm work in the realm of language, and I'm interested in this word vision. When we talk about vision, it's often a word that's we're asserting a kind of radical blueprint of how something should be. Vision is not always positive, of course. If we look at our political leaders right now, we might question some of their visions. But within the design sphere, I was wondering, how do you balance the courage to propose new visions with the responsibility to avoid harm? And where should the guardrails be? Who would like to answer that one? We're looking at you, Alice. You've had 10 minutes off.
I have. Well, first of all, the guardrails should be where they should be, and that isn't something I can generalize about because each project would be particular. But in terms of visions, I think one area where design needs to do a lot of work is how it does view the world. And this would be in terms of being fully open, inclusive, and diverse in terms of ethnicity, faiths, geography, and gender. So one of my favorite design books is by a brilliant woman, a women's rights activist called Caroline Criado Perez. And she wrote a book which basically asks the question, why is our world designed, and by that she meant the sort of consumerist world, designed by men, for men, and what are the consequences? And so she identifies and uses data to quantify various fundamental areas of our life where the skewed vision of designers towards the white male archetype is still posing huge problems. So, for example, cars are typically designed for the dimensions of the male body and with male sensibilities in mind, which she argues is why women are 27% likelier to die in car crashes or have serious injuries than men. And the same applies to a lot of medical work, particularly surgical procedures, simply because they were designed with only one human archetype in mind. And I think that if design is to fulfill its potential, to help us to improve our quality of life and deal with the massive challenges that we face, it stands to reason that we need the best possible designers, and we're not going to get them unless they reflect every area of society, every ethnicity, every faith, every gender. And so the more diverse and inclusive design becomes, the better.
Wonderful. Round of applause for that, right?
Thank you.
Roberto, you talk about meaning making. If designers are to propose new meanings, what gives them the legitimacy to define those meanings for others? And when does that become, say, an imposition even?
Well, that's a very nice question. It came to my mind in this moment a sentence by Stefano Marzano. Stefano Marzano has been the chief designer of Philips for a long time in the late 90s. At those times, Philips design was basically a university, was the most advanced place in which there were a lot of experiments. And actually, Philips used the three horizon methods, which is, you do short-term, mid-term, and then the big visions. It was a fantastic project with big vision. And so, you know what? Of course, when we improve things, we start from the user, and we need to, if a doctor needs to do an exam, we need to understand, the length of his hands and so on. But when we work on vision, we never start from the user. We know the technology, we make big research on how society is changing. And then use the metaphor of the good parent. And you say, you know what? Of course, a good parent doesn't give their children what they want. A good parent follow a vision, a meaning, okay? And you say, what gives them the legitimacy to decide what is good? Should I give candies to my children or not? There's no rule. The thing that gives them this kind of legitimacy is that they took that position. If you are a father, you take responsibility to be a father. If you're a leader in that position, you take responsibility for that position. And you do it for the best you can do, and no one can tell you what is right and what is wrong, as long as you take authorship. That's why I'm very worried of situation on design when there is no authorship. You don't see the names. I want to see the names of who design.
And the names will invariably be male, according to Alice. I mean, how do we safeguard against that the decision-making is happening within very skewed areas of society? How do we shift that to include as many people as possible?
Well, of course, this isn't a problem solely for design. It's a problem throughout many power structures, and it is getting better. So there are relatively few really sort of famous and acknowledged to be influential women designers of the past. If we just deal with gender as meaning straight women. And whereas now there are leading women designers in every field, they're just outnumbered by the men. So I have every confidence that this will incrementally grow in future, but it is going to take a mindset. I mean, people hate giving up territory that they have claimed as their own, or indeed inherited as their own. So that's the struggle for so many people, whether it is in terms of ethnicity or geography or gender. So one thing that I do find reassuring is another of Caroline Criado Perez's focuses was on medical care in general as being designed with men in mind, not women. But this is now one of the biggest areas of investment in Silicon Valley, because there's a whole group of highly intelligent, imaginative, empathic women who are now senior within tech design. They recognize this as being a problem for them, their daughters, their mums, their grannies, their genders, and they're determined to fix it. So I think as women's power grows generally within society, these issues will be addressed, but the sooner the better.
Yes. I also wanted to talk a little bit about risk. Are we taking enough risk, or have we become risk-averse these days? I say that because, of course, we're in the midst of the climate crisis, which is growing in urgency every day. We have continual political crises around the world, societal inaction or resistance even. Are we taking enough risks in light of all of these things bombarding us constantly?
Well, I wanted just to go back to what you were saying before about female designers and male, because, we also need to give credit to the design community that I don't have any statistics, but I can see a lot of female leaders in design, which is, in Stockholm, I told you before, last week we had the Stockholm Music Week. I was trying to invite, you can easily find a lot of female artists, but female managers, impossible to find. So we need to give credit to the industry that has been moving very well. And of course, there is a lot to do more, but it's in a good track. So it can be considered a good example. Talking about taking risk, yes, unfortunately, we are not living in very easy times, and when situations become complicated, companies tend to be quite conservative. And I understand, because it's a very, very difficult moment. There are, in the top of the minor leaders, there are typically two subjects in this moment: resilience and AI. So unfortunately, it's not an easy moment to take risk. We need to be creative in a way that to achieve big results through small steps. And sometimes when we achieve big results through small steps, it's more robust, which means that the subject of this session, which is a session on visions, the power of vision is that can be very radical. It doesn't mean that you need to take one big step to get there. Actually, most of the time a vision is more like a North Star, is a sense of direction. It doesn't really mean that you get there, but it drives a lot of very sparse action, independent of many different people in organization, in society. So a big, powerful vision is much more powerful than a big project, because then you can, give a sense of direction as small incremental things that get in there.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose also you could say that crisis is great for taking risks, because sometimes when it's really happening and it's really at your doorstep, the crisis that is, you are forced to take that risk much sooner. And to some extent, Design Emergency was created out of the pandemic, which was, of course, a shock for us all. You pivoted to create Design Emergency very quickly. That was a rapid moment of innovation and implementation. So I suppose, of course, by introducing that kind of thing very, very quickly, we're also stepping perhaps into the realm of failure. I wanted to pick up on playground of possibilities, the theme of this conference. If design is a playground of possibilities, then some experiments will, of course, fail, or they can cause harm. And who is responsible when that happens? Is it the designer? Is it the system, or the culture that encouraged the play in the first place?
Oh, a trick question. Well, in terms of specific allocation of responsibility, that entirely depends on the facts and what happened and who did what and who may or may not have overridden other people's decisions. But I think the whole issue of risk and failure has always been inherent in design, and it is hugely important that we address them in an open-minded way. And you're absolutely right that in times of extremity, and also times of technological change of any type, whether it was industrialization, digitization, or so on, that creates new opportunities for designers and also new opportunities for new types of designers to move into those spheres. So typically, for example, women designers tend to have excelled and found it easier to reach senior levels in new areas of design. So data visualization will be an example with the incredible work of Flavia Frigeri and other female data visualization designers. And this is true of most areas of technology. But when I saw the words playground of possibilities, I did immediately think of one of the great, well, not great, feeblest failures in design in recent years. It was in the early 2000s, and a US nonprofit launched what it called the Play Pumps Project. And they had this idea that if they set up water pumps, which in theory could provide water for entire villages or hamlets of people, so a very positive thing in a continent where there are dire shortages of water, that sort of roundabouts, children's merry-go-rounds would be installed there, and when the kids came out of school in the day, they could push the roundabouts round and round and pump up water for their families and their community, and that this would all be paid for by billboards that would be put on the top of the roundabouts. So it sounds bonkers when I say it, but a lot of people were very convinced by it, including, oddly, Laura Bush, wife of George W. Bush, and so First Lady of the United States, and they raised tens of millions of dollars in the US in particular to fund it. And all the promotional brochures and so on looked fabulous, with happy children pumping water for their communities. It was a catastrophe. The billboard system didn't work. The advertising industry just wasn't mature enough in the relevant areas for it to generate any income. There was no repair strategy in place. This is a classic problem for lots of development-oriented design projects. The kids didn't want to play non-stop on their roundabouts, and so literally voted with their feet and scampered off to play elsewhere.
For their
so it
iPhones.
never brought up enough water, and so on and so on. And so in certain areas of Africa, apparently the landscape is still littered with the corpses of these roundabouts. So that was the play pump debacle. And it is a brilliant example, and there's also a sobering and sad one, a very well-intentioned design project that just did not, rather like Task Force Erasgan, Western designers paying no attention to local needs, local politics, the local context.
Just wanted to add on top of it, because this is it's a very important question, the question you ask about, making experiment, taking risk. In the last 20 years, one of the things that in business school is taught is how, this idea of, fail and experiments, and I mean, one big thing has been what we call sprints. So you create in 5 days, you create a startup. Okay. What I see is happening now in big universities like Harvard and Stanford especially, there are courses in how to build a startup in 1 day. Okay. And when you build a startup in 1 day, they teach you how to use AI to do 10 experiments. Because it costs nothing to build ideas. It costs nothing to build an app, because we have lovables, we have all these things. And I'm very concerned because of this increase in productivity and idea generation and even implementation, because for digital products it's very easy now to release thousands of them, that we become the greatest polluters of the world. Polluters of ideas, but there is also a pollution of ideas. Should we, in the past it was difficult to do prototypes. So, okay, there was this natural barrier. You cannot do many, so you do one, and then the market will give you feedback. But now there is no limit on building prototypes. Should we really do 100 prototypes per day and let the market decide? And then I open my phone, I never know if it's a real app, is a test, is an A/B testing, is a student doing something? It's becoming crazy. So that's why the sense of authorship and responsibility is something we need to teach.
And is this part of the reason why we see so many kind of meaningless and harmful products on the market, do you think?
Yeah, the idea that we let people decide is important, but only people decide, and the thing is, you don't need to go to a design school to do that. You just become an algorithm developer.
Wow. I wanted to pick up on education. Alice, do you think design education, for example, is keeping pace with the social and ecological challenges that designers are stepping into? Is it indeed fit for purpose right now?
I think it's certainly trying to keep pace. And actually, I have to say, I've been impressed by the speed with which many design schools, typically the most intellectually and culturally dynamic ones, have completely transformed their syllabi. So, for example, in the UK, most furniture design and indeed product design courses disappeared some years ago simply because there was no longer enough demand to sustain them. So they haven't all disappeared, but a minority have survived.
Or the money to support them.
Or money to support them because there aren't enough students who actually want to attend them. And most schools have acted fairly swiftly in providing courses on humanitarian architecture, social activism, in design, and so on, just as the transition to conceptual design, which of course was led by Design Academy Eindhoven from the 1990s onwards. That is something that design schools all over the world have redesigned themselves to embrace. So I think actually design schools are rather more flexible, fluid, and market-driven than we probably suspect. And I always find it incredibly inspiring to give talks in the schools, and you realize how ambitious the students are and how they absolutely want to focus on using design to address the issues that are dearest to them.
Roberto, could you give us perhaps some tangible examples of some of the things that you're trying to change in the education sphere?
Well, again, I talk to a completely different perspective, because what I see is the relationship between design and business, which is I'm a strong supporter of designers being designers and business people being business people. They need to work together. Unfortunately, in the last 20 years, we have a lot of business education in design schools. and a lot of design education in business schools, which is good to a certain extent, and I'm responsible for that. It is what makes my life. But especially for design schools, sometimes it's sad to listen to designers explaining business people how to make business. Sometimes it's even ridiculous sometimes. But it's sad because the reason why business people get close to design is not to teach them how to make business, is to teach them how to understand user people better. And I repeat, I'm responsible for that. So I think it's the moment to go back to the strong tradition of design, which is really, let's have a business person with fantastic business competencies working next to a person which has fantastic design competence, but a little bit of a mix of two. We have two averages that don't make anything.
You've both talked about the need for collaboration, and I wonder if sometimes, many industries can be very siloed, or sometimes the design world feels like it's very much talking to itself. But in order to answer some of the big challenges of our world going forward, how do we create the kind of glue between a designer and the financiers and the engineers and the whoever else might need to be involved, the politicians, the policies, and so on? It often strikes me that the will is there, but the ability to connect with the other players to make something happen is not. How do we create that glue?
Well, I do think that process is already happening, possibly less in commercial design, but within the more culturally, politically, humanitarian-driven areas of design I'm talking about. So an example would be the British social scientist Hilary Cottam, who's a pioneer of social design globally. And about 15 years ago, she set up an organization called Participle, and its role was to develop blueprints, real, practical, actually working new models to address different areas of social services, whether it's provision of care for the elderly, reintegrating disaffected young people with their communities, helping the long-term unemployed to return to the workforce, and so on. And to do this, Hilary assembled teams of relevant specialists, so they could be economists, social scientists like her, techies, entrepreneurs, people with a wide range of skills, but each team was run by a designer in the conventional sense, a graphic designer or a product designer typically. And they spoke design language and they adhered to the design process because Hilary believed that it would yield a better outcome, that there would be more lateral thinking, the process would be more dynamic, more relevant. And she did pioneering work in all these fields. All the people who worked on these projects then went off to launch their own participles, and Hilary's now advising the UK government on design's role in neglected and deprived communities. And I thought that was a brilliant example of designers really using collaboration positively, whereas in the bad old days, designers, particularly commercial designers, tended to see collaboration as an opportunity to move into a new sphere and drum up lots of new business. I think the Hilary model is much more positive, and Forensic Architecture has adopted it, Forma Phantasma have adopted it for their investigative design research projects in Milan. So I really do think that significant progress has been made in that field.
And I certainly get a sense from students graduating today that is their appetite as well.
Yeah,
to
and who can blame
collaborate with their colleagues as much as possible.
But in an honest and generous and open-minded way.
We've got this dreaded clock ticking in front of us with 20 seconds remaining, so I'm going to jump to some of my final questions. We might run over a little bit. But Roberto, if you were speaking directly to the next generation of designers, some of whom may well be in this room, what do they need to unlearn? And what do they need to hold on to? Just a small question.
Well, maybe very rapidly. The unlearn, I said it before, forget about business. There's no need for more design and learning business. Leave it to the manager. Learn more design, art, sense-making, understanding society, dream a little bit more.
But
aesthetics.
but to unlearn.
Unlearn management.
Unlearn management.
Yeah. But designers don't need to learn about management.
Whew, what a relief. And Alice, what should designers stop doing tomorrow if they want their work to matter in 20 years from now?
I would actually vote to take out the 20 years from now from that and say if they want their work to matter. They have got to stop engaging in exploitative environmental practices. All the bad things, toxic global conflicts, wholly unsuitable and predatory employment practices, be much more diverse, inclusive, open-minded, intellectually open and agile. And I don't write about design because I have to. I chose it as my specialist subjects. I find it absolutely fascinating. And also, I'm a very curious person, or nosy, as my mum used to say. And design is a ubiquitous force in every areas of our lives. So if you write about it, you have to constantly research about all sorts of different things. And I love that continuing challenge. So I think designers just have to engage with all the changes that are around them and take advantage of what is a potentially very fertile time for the discipline and the culture.
Go forth and engage. We are out of time. Thank you, Alice and Roberto. I believe there is an opportunity for you all to engage over the next few hours as well with a networking session. Get to know each other better during this crucial period together here in Munich. Thank you to you both. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you for the question.